Greetings, fellow readers. This is Rambling Collector, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews. So, for the subject of this video, we are going to be talking about a self-published work called The Bannerman's Blade by Benjamin H. Blankenship. Now, Blankenship is someone whom I have covered in the past with their Wandslinger Wylie short story magical western collection, which to me was a very nice first taste of the western genre, but this one goes into full-length fantasy. And instead of a short story collection, it is a full-length novel, one that I feel has a lot of great promise after reading it, which definitely took me a while for reasons I'm going to explain, but after reading this, I can feel like it's a very good piece of fictional fantasy adventure. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about it. So first off, I want to say that The Bannerman's Blade alone, it provides an interesting take on regular fantasy books, featuring a heavy focus on world building and rising action. As in, the story gradually gets more intense as you continue, going from a simple story of revenge to the stirrings of an ancient evil. Like, by the end of the book, you'll see that our group of heroes here, who initially went out on a quest of personal vendetta against a drunkard of a man who assaulted them, and previously turns into them actually getting involved into a full-length conspiracy going on of the return of an evil dark force that they get caught up in when they become targets. And seeing all of that, gradually getting more and more desperate, the rising action, the whole climax of the entire book, it was definitely a nice payoff, and I actually thoroughly enjoyed it, especially the new plot threads that were introduced at the end of the story, which really works out, especially with the second book coming up. And quite honestly, I enjoyed it. Not to mention, the entire cast of characters was very entertaining to follow along with, from friendly giant Donal to the scholarly Keegan all the way to wandering singer Talia. My personal favorite was either Keegan or Cray, with a close second being Colden. And quite frankly, this is just something I felt after finishing it. It almost felt like reading a D&D party progressively gets stronger. Like when we first start out, they're just a ragtag group of friends who are going out with whatever weapons they can find, whether it's ancient blades, or their own improvised weapons of like a spiked club, or even just a regular pair of knives, and hell, you even had someone who had a sickle for a weapon. That alone tells you a lot that these folks did not know what exactly they were doing. They were just going off to try and find this guy who absolutely nearly killed one of their best friends, and by trying to run them over with a wagon of all things. And then, at the end of the day, right at the halfway point between in their hometown and where they run into the capital city, they find the guy, take him down, and then they go explore the city. Like, if anything, they probably could have ended it right then and there, saying, hey, the adventure's over. They found the guy, they took him down. But they found a way to keep the story going, where after the main plot thread is done, they continue on to explore the city and then get involved in another major issue. And that's why I kind of compare it to a D&D party. It's like you do one objective, but then you progressively travel, and then you get involved in another objective, which is honestly a really nice turn. It provided a way for the story to either rise up, but also progressively get much more serious. But it also had a lot of time to go for a downtime, like having them explore the capital city, learning about the history of their world, which we actually got a glimpse of that in the prologue chapter, but you know what I mean. But I will say my only major complaint thus far with this book is definitely the small print. Like, don't get me wrong with this. I have had experience with small print in the past, namely with a lot of Warhammer omnibuses, such as Crimson Fists and Night Lords especially. But this one in particular felt like a strain, because it's genuinely a smaller book, at around 200 or so pages, but it felt much longer because of how much was just crammed from top to bottom of every page. And because of that, sometimes it felt like the writing was just condensed in there. Now, I do understand if the publisher was just trying to make sure to fit everything in there, or if they had to like shrink the writing in order to make the entire story fit, because let's face it, publishing a book is very expensive. So I can understand the writer's issue with that. But looking at the second book, thankfully, it has a lot of larger print, so it should be a much easier read than the first book. But even then, do not let the small print deter you from checking this one out. It was genuinely a good story, and I'm kind of keen to find out what happens next, especially with the major cliffhangers and plot threads they left dangling at the end, or at least that they reintroduced. So I'm kind of excited to see what happens there. But next, let's go on to random thoughts here. So, if I'm being honest here, with just Bannerman's Blade, it feels like there's a lot of inspiration from Lord of the Rings. That being, it's a kind of a high fantasy. Well, it's more evolved in a way. But there is no magic as of yet that I have seen. It could pop up later on. But as of right now, it's a genuinely fun story. I liked how it was just this band of friends just going out to avenge one of their buddies, and then it involves them dealing with dark forces, which I've got to say, the main villain that they introduce here, Alejandra, man, she is terrifying. And I like the fact that she is essentially death personified to some of the folks, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish her goals and make sure all of her tracks are covered. Like, she is willing to set fire to an entire populace of a city just to burn down 2 or 3 people to make sure that they are taken care of, while also sending possessed guards or soldiers to take them out if the fire doesn't work. Like, she plans this whole thing out, and even involves herself with a minor character that we introduced to, Lord Suharing, who apparently has an old king's bloodline that she is very interested in. So she has to woo this man while also trying to get rid of any evidence that could prove that she is not who she says she is. Which makes her a very crafty and very dangerous villain, in my opinion. Not to mention her dark powers alone were very fascinating to see unfold. Especially that final fight where they all essentially go down to catacombs? In a way, I think it was, yeah, abandoned catacombs, and they had their whole final fight going on down there. Boy, howdy, was that ever intense. But I really liked how the characters each had their own ways to contribute to the group. You had Donald, who was the muscle. You had Talia, who was the singer and performer, who could also provide a good distraction. You had Cray, who could be able to dodge in and out of any sort of situation, like a sneaky assassin or a rogue. Then, of course, you had Keegan, who was the scholarly sort, who was more interested in studying ancient history, as well as learning how to wield an ancient blade that he found after a treasure chest seemingly fell on top of his head after a building collapsed on him and a few other friends. Yeah, like I said, this book does feel like it plays out like a D&D adventure, and I actually really liked that. But overall, I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen with this series. I'm kind of eager to see just how far they will go. Because the author alone actually, fun fact, they not only write their stories, but they also hand paint the covers for their books. So you're essentially getting a 2-for-1, where you get a painted photo of what's going on in the author's world, but you also get them to write a story about it. Honestly, that's a great 2-for-1 if you ask me. But more than that, this author definitely has a lot of creative talent, and I'm kind of keen to see what they're going to do next, especially in response to Wandslinger Wylie. Now, that was a good piece of Western literature. And Bannerman's Blade has proved to be a good piece of, well, fantasy literature. And I'm really keen to see what's going to happen next, because there's always these little pockets and nuggets of history that are sprinkled throughout, which makes for really good world building. Anyways, you guys, I'm sorry, I'm ranting here a little bit, but that being said, let's move on to the final score. So, I feel comfortable putting Bannerman's Blade, the first of a series, at least a solid 9 out of 10, with again, my only complaint being the small print, that left the writing feeling a bit crammed and rushed at times. But overall, it was a very enjoyable piece of fantasy fiction, and I'm really eager to see what happens next in Book 2. So you'll have to stay tuned for that whenever that review does come out. But in the meantime, I hope you all enjoyed this review. And Mr. Blankenship, if you're watching this as well, I hope you enjoyed this review as well, and I'm really excited to review more of your works in the future. especially since you mentioned that you've got another Wandslinger Wylie in the works, and I'm very keen to find out what's going to happen there. But more than anything, folks, if you like this video, feel free to leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, or subscribe if you're interested for more. Or if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them down there as well. I'm more than eager to take on a challenge, and I really hope you all enjoyed this. It's been a genuine honor to talk about books with you all, and just have a bit of fun, you know? So I hope you all enjoyed. All right, this is Rambling Collector, signing off for now, and I'll see you all in the next podcast. Stay tuned, fellow readers.